Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Thank you, David, for that introduction. And it's great to be here and have some great speakers alongside me this morning. As David mentioned, I spent most of my career working in the field of intelligence, mostly in signals intelligence, counterterrorism, that type of thing. But in the past 2 or 3 years, I've been working in open source intelligence with Neo-Century Intelligence. And open source intelligence, for those of you that don't know, is around collecting intelligence from the open web. So open data that could be of intelligence value to individuals, to businesses, or to governments. Now, when I was thinking about what to talk about and what to present to you guys today, I thought that there's something that, for me, I've noticed in the past few months that is really quite striking in the field of open source intelligence, and that's around ways in which open data is beginning to be used for malign purposes. But before we go into that, let's start with the good news. To use Silicon Valley in the Lego movie's favorite phrase, everything is awesome. It's awesome, isn't it? If you think about it, you have governments that are using open data to change policy, to better direct the money that they spend, our tax money. Individuals are much better informed about the world because there's so much open data out there. They can now Google and search for anything. Non-profits can obviously better target AIDS research and where to build the next water plant in Africa, that type of thing. Cities can, of course, build far more smarter and better transport systems because they can use open data in a way to better inform where they place things. Of course, corporations can monetize open data, make money from it, better understand their customers and their clients. And of course, scientists as well can collaborate internationally, looking at finding the new cures for Zika or Ebola and that type of thing. So, open data, isn't it brilliant? For the most part, yeah. But what I would say is there's also some hidden risks to open data that we don't think about. And we tend to, in the past decade or so, we've had this one-dimensional view of open data, as in it's brilliant. And the more open data we have, the better. Everything's great. But what I would argue is we're actually being held back by the scale of the internet, by our understanding of the size of the internet. If I ask every one of you right now here to think about how big the universe is, what happens in your brain, you just kind of hit a wall, don't you? You can't imagine how big the universe is. None of us have anything to compare it to. And that's what the internet's like. If you think about it, if you use your iPhone or your laptop, the experience hasn't actually changed for at least 10 years. The screen might be bigger, it might be faster, the web pages might load faster, there might be more colors on the screen, the video definition might be higher, but ultimately, it's the same experience. But beneath that, the amount of data that you're using and you can access is just growing exponentially. And someone alluded to earlier some cool statistics, so I thought I'd bring a few along, given this is a wired security conference. So here's number one, to try and help you imagine the scale. Data center CO2 emissions are now greater than that of the entire global air travel industry. And this happened last year, I think, so imagine where it will be going in the next few years. The next one. At the moment, there are now currently 10 billion Snapchat video views per day. Billion. Now, what does that mean? It means, to me, and to quote Del Harvey, who was a former, or I think current head of security at Twitter, that means there are 1 in a billion event is happening 10 times a day on Snapchat. And a 1 in a million event is obviously happening 1,000 times a day. Now, in 6 months' time, that figure is going to be 18 billion if Snapchat's trends currently continue. That's just one other frightening statistic that intellectually it's really hard. Now, Google, thankfully, claim that there are 60 trillion web pages, unique web pages on the web. 60 trillion. We cannot begin to imagine, our brains just cannot cope, and I would say that holds us back from understanding this new world that we're in. So, how is this a problem? Why is it a concern? Now, I thought about talking about Russia, for example, which is weaponizing open data in very interesting ways, as you probably can all imagine. Islamic State, using social media as a way to influence followers. But actually, the example I'm going to use is the finance industry. So, meet Wirecard. Now, Wirecard are a German mobile payments business. They were founded in the late 1990s, a bit like Stripe or PayPal. Obviously, some have heard of them. And Wirecard really have been, for the last few years, a darling tech stock. They've been one of these e-commerce companies that people have been investing in, market capitalization of about 5.5 billion, good revenues, all intents and purposes, an interesting company. Now, something happened to Wirecard earlier this year, and it came from a very unlikely place. Welcome to the British Virgin Islands. Not a bad place. It's nice to kind of zone out for a few seconds, but pay attention. And in February of this year, in the British Virgin Islands, a report was published by an unknown research institute or research and investigations business called Zatara. Now, this company, their servers were hosted on Wix. Their company was obviously registered in the BVI. It's very hard to work out who they really were. But they claim on their website to be a research and investigations business and a boutique firm of investment professionals, analysts, and forensic researchers. And in my mind, what I'm trying to tell you here is this is where short sellers in the financial world work together with open source intelligence analysts to make money. So, what did Zatara do? Well, they published a very, very long document of around 50 to 60 pages accusing Wirecard of hosting porn on one of its employee company websites, of evading the US Secret Service, of money laundering, and of basically claiming that the whole company was incredibly corrupt and everything was going wrong with the business. Now, what was interesting about this to me was that it looked very much like an open source intelligence report. There was lots of screenshots. There was lots of who is data, lots of LinkedIn network diagrams, and so on and so forth, proving to the reader that this business was corrupt and was not worth investing in. And what was interesting is, I haven't gone through every single fact, but all of these things appeared to be true. I haven't verified all of them individually, but they all appear to be true. And on the day that Zatara published this, it was retweeted by the Financial Times, and Wirecard's share price on the 24th of February fell by a quarter in a single day. Now, why would anyone do such a thing? Well, as some of you may know, in the finance industry, you can buy options to short stocks. You can actually begin to predict. You can say, I'm going to buy 100 Apple shares, and I'm going to bet that they're going to go down. And in a month's time, if the shares have gone down, I make money off the option that I've made. So what they did, they released this report, stock crashed, Wirecard was forced to defend all these allegations. Hey, presto. Make sense? The interesting thing is, I was looking into this and thinking, okay, here's a really interesting story, I can go into the detail. But then I found this has been happening quite a lot in the financial industry, and you've seen these worlds of intelligence and short selling coming together. The second one is a company called Gotham. And what Gotham did, very similar to Zatara, was publish another report. Now this is Quindel. Quindel are a British company. They started off as a golf club and bizarrely turned themselves into an insurance business and a telematics reseller. Now, in my opinion, I wouldn't have invested a penny of my money, and I'm Scottish, in Quindel. They just looked a bit weird, to be honest, and to some extent, I don't disagree with some of Gotham's findings. Just didn't seem right. But what Gotham did, again, this highlights the interesting thing is, it was the same playbook. Gotham there was no name on the report. No name. It was an anonymous report. We don't really know who runs Gotham. There's suspicions of one or two people who may well run the research outfit, but again, this was an anonymous report that was published on the internet. Now, what happened when Gotham published this report? I think you might be able to guess where things are going. In the space of 40 minutes, Quindel's share price went down by £1 billion. Now, if you think about all these little facts in turn. You have this company, they're not willing to put their name on the research individually. They're clearly in a position where they will make money from publishing the report and claiming that this company's bad, but yet the stock market somehow seems to trust the report. Now, all of these reports are available on the open web magically. That's what's great about open data, so if you want to go and read them in turn, you can. But this is where things get interesting now. A couple of months ago, we've got a third player in this market. So I mentioned open source intelligence analysts and I mentioned short sellers, and we now have cybersecurity, grey hat, white hat, whatever you want to call them, guys working in this field as well. Now, what happened here was a company called St. Jude Medical, now huge US medical device maker. They've got about 18,000 employees, revenues of $5.5 billion, headquartered in Missouri, I think. And St. Jude also have come under attack from one of these open source intelligence reports. But this time, it was through a cyber company. So if we go back to the Caribbean for a second, this time to St. Kitts and Nevis, last year, a company called MedSec was registered. Now, what MedSec claimed to do was conduct medical research in the cybersecurity research in the medical industry. And a month before they published the report, they were incorporated in Delaware. And what MedSec had done was they found vulnerabilities in pacemakers. I'm so glad someone mentioned that earlier. So electronic pacemakers that are obviously connected by Bluetooth or Wi-Fi to the individual, and some of you may have seen in various Hollywood programs, the whole idea is that someone could hack them and kill thousands of people with a single keystroke. Maybe that's possible, I don't know. But what MedSec did was apparently find vulnerabilities in these pacemakers. Now, what would any good cybersecurity company registered in St. Kitts and Nevis do when it came to giving detail about this key vulnerability where lots of people could die? Did they go to St. Jude? I think you might know where the story's going. No, they went to a company called Muddy Waters. Now, Muddy Waters is probably the most famous of these research companies that tend to publish what I deem open source intelligence investigations on businesses. And what MedSec and Muddy Waters did was join up, and MedSec used Muddy Waters' name to publish the report and to say, everybody should short St. Jude stock because their pacemakers are vulnerable to cyber attacks. This report, again, is available on the open web. Everything is awesome. And what's interesting about the report is that there was never any specific detail with regard to the vulnerability. They just talked about there being a vulnerability. That vulnerability was never actually published in the report. So the whole thing was based on an accusation in a way. There was lots of facts in there about how the devices were vulnerable. It's a long report. If you're interested in that type of thing, go and have a read. And look what happened to St. Jude stock. This was only a couple of months ago. It went down about 10%. Now, St. Jude, interesting, was on the subject of a takeover bid at the time, or a few months beforehand, so who knows what was going on. But this is very interesting because you've now got cybersecurity, grey hat hackers playing in the short selling space alongside financiers. Why does this matter? Some people might argue that, cybersecurity is the new rock and roll. And in the case of the MedSec CEO, maybe it is. I would argue that it's important because you've got unknown companies publishing reports affecting stock prices, and whatever you think of that company, the reports appear to be one-sided in one way or another, and they appear to be constructed using certain facts. So going back to the hacking world, has anyone heard of doxing? Does everyone know what that is? So doxing is when you dump documents online to embarrass someone, to cause them reputational harm. Hackers would do this to each other frequently to expose them, to get each other arrested, that type of thing. And what you're seeing here in the doxing world is what I might call stock doxing. So you're doxing an entire business. You're collecting all these facts that conveniently fit your narrative, and you're doxing the entire business, claiming that the stock is not worth what it says it is, and obviously making money from the short sell. So why does this really matter for you, and what's the key message I'm trying to give you today? Is that if you think about what I was saying at the start, about the billions of facts that are published every day on the web, it means that there are so many facts, you can find any facts you want that will probably fit your narrative. You can then build a report based on that narrative. And you can make any company or any individual look like a rock star or look like the worst company on earth. What is that doing to objective research? What is that doing to reality? Google and lots of other businesses have now started launching fact-checking sites to try and get around this problem. But I'm concerned, and I think the world of objective and I suppose ethical research is a challenge now because of the fact that there are so many facts out there. It's very hard to disprove these things. I may well take 5% of facts about a company, put them into a report, crash the stock, but does that mean that company's bad? I don't know. So how can you prevent stock doxing? If you work for, or you're involved in a listed company, or you buy shares, or you've got interest in certain businesses, what can you do to try and prevent this? And really, the piece of advice, and I think this is a theme throughout this morning about simple pieces of advice, is you have to proactively manage your online footprints. You have to red team these things. If you're really concerned that this might happen to you or your business, you have to go on the offensive and go, if someone was going to write one of these reports about my company, how would they do it? What facts would they find? And keep going, keep investigating. This is open data. You don't necessarily need any magic licenses or tools. You just get on with the job and try and pretend to be one of these stock doxers. Thank you very much.
Cameron, so you're on the good guy side, the ethical side. How do you work as an ethical intelligence gatherer? What are you allowed to do and what are you not allowed to do?
We work on the simple principle that if data is on the open web, then we're allowed to use it. So we obviously don't go behind any firewalls or log into anyone's Facebook pages and things like that. That counts as hacking in the Computer Misuse Act. So yeah, we work on the basis that if data is published on the web, on the open web, and is technically accessible by anyone, then that's how we work on the ethical side. Because we use open data, it means that whether it's a court of law or an annual report, our clients can use our intelligence reports to justify their decisions in a transparent way.
Does this disadvantage your clients who can also go to the slightly less ethical intelligence gatherers?
It might do, and some of them may well use several different providers at one time to answer one question. There's a good point around resilience there. They may well use a human intelligence company to answer some questions and use an open source intelligence company to answer others. So.
And what is the demand that you're seeing from your clients? What sort of problems are they trying to solve?
Litigation is always a very interesting one when you've got lots of different shell companies or networks of individuals and trying to kind of understand litigation. And many lawyers tend to not be technically proficient, so we kind of provide a much more expert service for them. M&A deals as well, really interesting. Geopolitical intelligence, it's another one where there's lots of data. So.
I'm not going to ask you for any stock tips. I'm just going to say thank you, Cameron Colquhoun.